Okay, take two. Right. Okay, so this time what I'm doing is I'm using a combination of range selector and wiggly selector. So the first thing I'm going to do, because this Mexican wave is going to essentially raise up and kind of wiggle as it does, I first of all need to create an animator that's going to do the raise up or the rise up part. So I go down to my text and I'll set an animator, and the property that it's going to animate is position. Go into the right composition first, animate and position. So there we are. Okay, now what I want to do first of all is to get the text into that kind of basic Mexican wave. So I'm going to use my range selector, and I'm going to use my start, my end, and set my position property so that everything within range goes up to a certain height. In the advanced tab, I'm going to set it from square to smooth, so it moves in a little bit more of a natural kind of a way. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the offset so that it moves that range across from left to right, and it's going to happen over around 3 seconds. Okay, so I could call this animator now raise the text, and I'll close that. Okay, so this is doing its thing, and I'm going to come back to that in a moment, and I'm going to grab that range selector for reuse elsewhere. Before I do, I'm going to deselect my layer, and I'm going to create another animator, and this animator is going to adjust the rotation property. Now the rotation property is going to go basically roughly 45 degrees in each direction, and it's going to happen in a kind of a fast way. So in order for me to be able to create that kind of crazy rotating backwards and forwards, I need to use a wiggly selector as opposed to a range selector. So I click on add selector, select wiggly selector, and go in and change a few of these properties. So I want to leave it at max and min amount of 100 and minus 100. Basically what that means is that it's going to go to that value and then back to the negative value. So it'll be going from 50 to minus 50. And I want to increase the amount of wiggles per second up to something like 8, so that it will happen in a little bit more of a fast kind of jittery way. And the last thing I'm going to do then is to bring the correlation down to 0, so that they don't kind of adhere to each other when they start to do that wiggle, that they do it in a very random, unique way for each character. Okay, so that's 0 correlation. That's 60. You can't see much of a difference, but when you get up to the higher values, you'll see it start to kind of, each character is almost kind of sticking roughly to the one on either side of it. And when you bring it to 100, they all do the exact same thing. Okay, so they're all perfect correlation now. Back to 0. I want to keep it kind of random. Okay, so what's happening now is my second animator is creating that wiggling effect. My first animator is creating the raising up of the text, but they're both kind of working independently of each other at the moment. So what I need to do is find a way to get the wiggling to only happen within that sweeping range as it moves from left to right. Now I'm going to leave raise the text to do its own thing. That's fine, it's got a job to do and it's doing it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the range selector that is moving across the text, and I'm going to duplicate it, hitting Command and D. And then I'm going to bring that range selector down into my new animator, which I'll rename to rotate shaky. Now, first of all, I'll delete the existing range selector because that's just going to get in the way of what I want to do. And I'll bring range selector 2, which is a duplicate or a clone of range selector 1, down there. So what I have now is I've got the exact same range moving from left to right, adjusting the raising of the text, the position, and you can see the position property here being adjusted. And then down here in the rotate shaky animator, I now have two selectors working in conjunction with each other. I've got range selector 2, which is moving across, and because my wiggly selector is set to intersect, then only where the range exists on the text will that wiggling take place. Okay, so if I wanted to, I could now start adding other properties to it, such as scale. I'll just play this out so you can see the end result. I could increase the amount of wiggles per second maybe, and the amount that it rotates, just to get a more extreme version. Okay, so that's essentially how you use the wiggly selector, and how you would then combine the wiggly selector with another range selector. And that is very common for you to be using that wiggly selector in conjunction with one or two other selectors, such as range selector.